the third Sunday in Black History Month, or if you prefer, Transfiguration Sunday. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The Gospel according to Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 9. Lift every voice and sing. Mountains bear up. They mount up, as we say, to dizzying heights. The higher they climb, the more majestic they appear. Some are lifted from the low-lying plains to so lofty a height that billowing clouds drape and hide their rugged, rocky, and raptured face. Sun-kissed and windswept, mountains strike an imposing posture of authority, power, and solemnity. Mountains hold secrets. But secrets they want to reveal, secrets concerning the invisible things of God. In one famous episode, the inner workings of the moral law came into Moses' possession only because he dared to scale a mountain bristling with lightning and booming with thunder. In another, Elijah took to the mountains to escape his adversary, Jezebel, so that he might quietly die, only to have an encounter with an ambassador from heaven who pushed and goaded him to take sustenance to strengthen his limbs for the prophetic tasks ahead. In our gospel reading for today, Matthew shares an equally famous account of a trek into the mountains. Jesus takes with him Peter, James, and his brother John for a respite beyond the crowds, that teeming host of bewildered, befuddled, beseeching, and benumbed children of man. The steep, skin-bruising ascent along the jagged, stony-faced rock makes the disciples stop to catch their breath, to mend resolve, and to summon effort to recommence the climb. But there, up ahead, they see Jesus scampering over crag and cliff, a spring in his legs they had not suspected. His agility over this rough terrain does not surprise them so much as it fills them with wonder and awe. Again, they find themselves asking, who is this that he scales mountains as though he could walk on water? In their hearts, they have already answered that he is the one promised in the word of the prophets and the psalmists. He is the blessed one, the one sent of God, the anointed one, the Messiah of whom Isaiah had spoken. Still, they are unprepared for what follows next. But wait. Do you remember how we began this year? How the wise men came from the east under the cover of a dark starlit night? Do you recall how dim and faint was the light of that star that drew them on, how it brightened as they came nearer, and closer still to the place where the Christ child lay. Was that not an unveiling of the hidden God in the small form of an infant child? How much brighter had the light become in the day 30 years on, when Jesus came to the edge of the Jordan, stepped into his chilly waters, and charged John to baptize him? Did the sky crack that day? And did the holy voice of all creation declare that Jesus was the Son in whom God was well pleased? Was that not a disclosure, at least to John the Baptist, of the one he had heralded? And so, in the story that Matthew tells, he weaves two separate images to reveal the manifestation of God's presence in Jesus and in the world. The first is mountain, but the second is light. In the story now before us, the two images coalesce with blinding, knee-shaking, heart-stopping, breath-catching ecstasy. Jesus is transfigured before the disciples, bathed in a radiant, all-illuminating light that makes his raiment shimmer and shine. He is dazzling to sight, more dazzling than stars that pierce the mantle of night, brighter still than a tree engulfed in flames, and brighter than a summer day when cloud break gives way to a voice from the sky. Jesus is not on fire, for the shine on his face makes even fire to blush. Against so bright a spectacle, the disciples must squint and rub their eyes for fear that they might go blind. But before the disciples can conjure the meaning of what they see, here beyond the timberline of the mountain's hoary head, they see within the glare of so much light, not one but three in holy colloquy. Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. Yes, Jesus makes three. The ineffable catches up the disciples, and Peter is beside himself with so giddy a delight that he blurts out what makes no sense at all against the vision he is granted of Jesus standing in blessed holy communion with Moses, the tablet-bearing emancipator, and Elijah, the idol-smashing prophet. The sight so overwhelms all sense that Peter's only response is a stammering offer to build booths, mortal-crafted homes for immortal holy emissaries from God above. But the irrelevance of Peter's gesture, his hope to sustain the moment, to capture the vision beyond the fullness of that moment, gives way before the startling voice that sounds from the misting shroud of cloud. This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. This passage has always arrested my full attention. I have always wondered why Jesus took Peter, James, and John along with him in his mountainside hike in the first place. Why had he bothered to take any of the disciples at all? And why these three rather than Bartholomew, say, or Thomas and Andrew? What point could their presence serve in this tableau of light and sight, of word and calling? Who are they, these feckless, uncomprehending disciples, against so august an appearing of Moses and Elijah in this conference of divines? What significance do they bear? That impetuous but slack-kneed Peter in those brothers, James and John, sounding like thunder in one moment, but hiding their voices come the next, when Jesus is on trial. Again, I ask, why are they there? And what good are they to this scene, these utterly ordinary, fear-pierced men? Well, I recall many years ago, in one of the first courses ever I undertook to probe the ways of sages and philosophers, that one query had one power, had more power to stump and perplex the wisest of them. It wondered, if a tree fell in the forest but no one was there to hear it, did it ever really make a sound? The question emphasized and underscored the critical importance of perception to the full manifestation of reality. Evidence that something has happened or is happening is meaningful only in relation to the one who bears it witness. Evidence without a witness is no evidence at all. An epiphany, that is to say, in this case, without one or even three, for whom the epiphany is an epiphany, that is no epiphany at all. As it turns out, Peter, James, and John are as important as the overpowering vision they are blessed to receive. Without their witness on the mountain, they will be unable to remember the meaning of Jesus' transfiguration in the light of his passion, his death, and resurrection, which is yet to come. Without their presence within the cloud, the voice of God has no one to address, no one to whom God may announce God's unconditional love for Jesus. Nor would it make any sense at all for God to tell Moses and Elijah to listen to Jesus and to obey what Jesus says. Peter, James, and John stand in for you and for me, and for all our kind, to bear witness to the reality of the sacred in a shallow world. What this means is that God wants our attention, to hold us wrapped in moments of brilliant light, that God wants us alert and not asleep. God wants us woke. Yeah, he does. Wants us woke so that we might attend the witness of our forebears, the ones who saw through the strangle knot of slavery's curse to a day of perfect liberty in the bosom of Abraham, as we like to say. God bends the arc of history from unrighteousness to justice, justice coming on with the inexorable force of the law and the prophets. We miss the power of our text today if we think it is only about Peter, James, and John. No, it's about more than them. It's about some other witnesses as well. Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Henry Box Brown, and Jarena Lee, too. It is about the witness of the spirituals and the harrowing testimony of survivors who escaped alone to tell us of the race riots in Tulsa, St. Louis, and Rosewood, Florida. It is the steady, unblinking disclosure of the ugly against the beautiful, the ignorant against the wise, the evil against the righteous, and the profane against the holy. When Jesus descends that mountain, his hair dusted with mountain silt and his hands calloused from grasping the bark of trees, he will set his face like flint for Jerusalem, to face off against the spit in his face and the corded whip that will flay his back. No one will know what Peter, James, and John had seen then. No one will have heard it. Not yet. They will not know about how Jesus' face flashed with glory, how Jesus was bound to Moses and Elijah as though they had never died. Nor will they know anything of the voice, the rumble of profundity that commanded obedience to Jesus, as though Jesus' voice and God's voice were exactly the same. No one will know until after Jesus has risen from the grave and ascended into the arms of that all-loving God just what Peter, James, and John had seen. And everyone will know because Peter, James, and John will remember, and they will testify. It will all come back to them, and all of it together will make sense. Peter will find his voice at last, his preacher's voice, the voice of witness. James and John will find theirs too, those sons of thunder calling down bolts of lightning when they lift their voices in song. When we hear them, we are stirred up, and their vision becomes our vision. Just so I hear the visionary testimony of James Weldon Johnson, the vision in music of Florence Price, the witness in letters in law of the Grimke family, every single one of them, the witness of Absalom Jones in the Episcopalian Church, in the witness of Alexander Crummell from America to Africa and back again. I hear the woe and triumph of the disconsolate, the disinherited, the diminished, the defamed, and the dismissed. I pray for Jesus then. I do. I pray for Jesus to drag Governor DeSantis and the other hecklers of critical race theory and the deniers of learned black historians. I pray for Jesus to drag them all into the mountains for an encounter with God. I want a beam of light to strike them off their high horses and to blind them for a month. I want DeSantis to wake up so that he becomes one among the woke to see the cross he must bear. I want to hear him confess with his own mouth, I am a man of unclean lips and an unclean tongue. Well, let a seraph take a burning coal from the altar to touch him in his mouth. And then let us hear what he says about black history then in the glowing luster on yonder mountaintop. Then might he find our song to wail in chorus with all of us. Lift every voice and sang till earth and heaven rang. Amen.